Good morning and welcome to another installment of the ISM Lunch and Learn webinar series. Today, because it's that time of year again, we're going to be looking at all the options for creating budgets in your Sage 100 system. Today, Mr. Bruce Kern will be walking us through all the steps. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. All lines will be muted in order to prevent background noise, which could interfere with the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will open up the phone lines for questions. If you come up with something during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat window or the raise your hand icon in your console, in your GoToWebinar console, and we'll address those at the end of the meeting. So we thank you all for attending, and with that, I'm going to turn everything over to Bruce. Bruce, thank you and welcome.
Okay, great. Sherry, thank you for the very nice introduction, and welcome everyone. With that great introduction, I think we'll just dive right in here. So to the budgeting lunch and learn. All right, the first thing that we need to talk about is some setups that are related to budgets. So under the general ledger here, we have the various options to get into various things. So we're going to go into setup, and we're going to go into these general ledger options, and we're going to talk about how this, what we have in here that affects the budgeting. So there's actually a whole tab number 3 here in most versions of Sage, is a whole tab dedicated to kind of setting up your budgets. So the system comes with a couple default budgets. These are the original and revised budget. Those are 2 budgets that come literally out of the can. You cannot delete those 2 budgets. Other budget codes you can create as you wish, and there's basically an unlimited amount of budget codes that you can create. So first concept to kind of get used to in Sage is that Sage tracks each budget by a budget code. So as you can see on the screen that we have here, there's 3 of them, the original, the revised, which came with Sage, and we have a user-defined budget that I'm just calling budget 3. Each one, there can be one of the budgets can be set as your default budget. So you can see that on my screen, the original budget is the default budget. The default budget selection just means that when you're running certain reports that involve budgets, that the original budget will be the default budget selected for that report. You have the option at the bottom of the screen to check this box to copy the actual to the default budget at year end. So if you check that box and you accept that option and you're performing year-end processing, then that's when that action will occur. So it doesn't magically occur on January 1st. I want to make that clear. It occurs when you perform the action of closing the year under the GL period and close option. So if that happens in February, that's the point in time in which it will copy the actuals from your previous year over. I'm not going to do that for today's demo, and I'm just going to leave this the way it is. So if you wanted to add new budget codes, all you'd have to do is type in a new code, give it a name, whatever you want to call it, and hit accept, and then it's there. You're ready to actually start using that budget, even though it doesn't have dollars in it yet, which we're going to cover through the rest of the demonstration today. Okay. All right. Let's see here. The next thing we're going to look at is we're going to kind of work our way through from what I kind of call the baby bear budget features up to the more advanced or more sophisticated features. And so the first place we're going to start is in the general ledger account maintenance. So if we open up the general ledger here and we go to account maintenance, and I'm just going to pull up an account here. I'm going to kind of play a lot with the revenue accounts today because that's a key area that a lot of people like to budget. So over here on this variance tab, this deals with budgets also. So you can see that the original budget defaulted into the screen, and we always have this column for the activity here. So in this case, we're dealing with demo data. The data is dated 2020, so you'll notice that throughout today, you might see a lot of 2020 dates. That's why, in case you're wondering. So whatever shows up here in this activity column is based on what you have selected over here as your fiscal year. So if I change that to a different fiscal year, I see that activity column changes based on that fiscal year. So I'm going to leave this as 2020 since it's what we're working with. Okay, over here on the actual budget column here, this is where we get to tell it, what else we want to see. So we could pick different budget codes if we wanted to do that. We could also pick different activity levels, but since we're in a budgeting demo here, that's why we have that set to that. But I did want to point out that you can change that to be any budget you have or even another activity. Over here on the variance column, this is telling you how much you're off. Now this budget is 0, so the whole variance is the whole amount. But this could be one way that you could see how you're doing against your budget if you actually had budget data in here, which we will shortly. But this is one screen where you can kind of see on an account level basis what you have. Now, we don't have, there's not any budget numbers in here at the moment. Let's just see if I can find one that might have some. Yeah, they're all blank. It doesn't really matter. We'll see this soon enough. It's a good time, though, to remind you that this is a grid screen, and any grid screen you have can be an export to Excel. So if you were evaluating some budget data, for example, against this particular account, and you wanted to drop that into Excel, you could just right-click in that grid and hit the export to Excel, and it drops right into Excel for you pretty neatly because it's in a grid. So always remember you have that option. All right, going to go back to the number 400 account again. And on each general ledger account, there's this budget button in the upper right-hand area. So this is, your first place where you can actually start entering budget information. So in here, you've got a lot of different options. One of the things that you can do is you can just hand key information into these cells. Now, since this is a revenue account, revenue for you accounting types, which we've got lots of on the phone here, revenue is increased by a credit, and revenue is decreased by a debit. That's just your basic, accounting equation for how it affects this type of an account. So one of the things you might want to be careful of if you're budgeting for revenue is that you need to use the credit sign, which is the minus sign, if you're putting in your budgets. So in this example, I'm saying that period 1 would have a positive revenue of $1,000. Then the minus signs simply just denote it as a credit. So even if I type the minus, it's fine there. It just knows that that's the difference. So, if we're looking at this revised budget, that's why some of these have negatives, if you're wondering about that. So you can hand key information into these screens. That's one way of changing this. So let's talk a little bit about what these icons do across the right-hand side here. So this first icon here is the select budgets icon. So if we click this, I'm going to say no for now. This is just really a place for us to tell it what we want to see in here. So right now you see I've got 5 different things added here, and if I want to get rid of any of this, I can just hit the X, and maybe I'll get rid of, maybe I'll get rid of this next year budget. And here I have original, revised, and activity. So if I want to, it's another screen where I can compare the results. There's no variance calculation here like there was in that other screen, but with this icon, I can control exactly what budget data I'm seeing, and if I want to, I can include some actual activity, which might help me doing my budgeting process. Okay, and if I want to add something, all I got to do is just click into that and come down here and tell it, well, what do I want? Do I want an activity? Do I want one of these existing budget codes? If you pick the activity, of course, you have to tell it for what year you want. So just like that, and just adds it to the screen. It's really that easy. So I'm going to take that back out of there for now. We'll leave the activity and kind of stay in 2020. Now the next icon down here, this little gear cog, this is your change budget icon. So instead of manually just keying information into these fields, I can use this change budgets icon to do a little bit more automated approach. So we have different change methods, so you can see about the different types of methods here. So you can copy an amount, change an amount, you can kind of see what those say. I'm going to just do an annual budget for now, and then if I put this amount in here, of $12,000, let's say, and I hit proceed, it filled in the column that I was populated. So annual budget means here's the total amount, 12,000, and it split it between the periods equally. So in this case, 1,000 per month. You can use this to do other types of automation. So whether you want to copy something, if you tell it you want to copy and you hit proceed, you got to have something in that cell to copy. So let me see here. And you can play around with these features. They're pretty harmless. So let's see here. If we go there, we say copy that amount, and it just copied that amount all the way down the column. So I'm not going to go into every one of these types of things that you can do, but you can kind of play around with that. But the copy is a real popular one. The annual budget's a real popular one. You can play around with the change by amount, change by a percent, figure out what works for you. All right, so this next icon here is the calculate budget wizard. So this is going to take us through a little wizard, hence the term wizard, and we're just going to follow the wizard along. And I want to be back over here on this 2020 original for this. So we're just going to hit next, and it's going to ask us questions. Okay, which budget do I want to calculate? Maybe I'll do the original budget again. Which periods do I want to affect? I'm just going to do the whole year. What do I want to use as my source for this change? So as you can see, I can do the activity. I can use the original budget, revised budget, whatever I want to do here. So I'm just going to say use the original budget. And then I'm going to say if I wanted to copy it, that wouldn't make sense because I already have it. Maybe I'm going to adjust it by an amount, let's say, or a percentage. Let's just go with the amount for today. Let's just make that amount, I don't know, we'll make it $500. Let's just see what it does. Okay, so we're going to adjust it by $500, and we're going to hit next, and we're just going to hit finish, and it's going to do the heavy lifting for us. So right there, it just updated my budget from being, I think, $1,000 a month to now being $500 a month. So it works kind of similar to that calculate budgets to the change budgets icon, but it just is in a little wizard, So whether you want to use the, calculate budgets wizard, or whether you want to use the gear cog, there are all ways that you can affect this. And then this is an icon here that you can use to clear your budget. As long as you haven't hit accept, it'll wipe out whatever you've done since the last save. And then you have some options here to reset the last budget cell or all budget cells. Okay, not a big deal on those since this is so malleable. It's easy to just come in here and zero those out, or you can use this tool to wipe everything out. So the other things to kind of note about that is that, that change that you made on those budgets for that is effective immediately. They'll show up on reports immediately, and there's no audit trail of any of those changes that you might have just made through that account maintenance budget icon. Let's see here. All right, now we'll go to budget maintenance next. That's our next stop. So under the general ledger, there's actually a whole budget menu item. So that's under the budget here. If we expand that, we can kind of see that there's a whole budget menu here. So if we go into budget maintenance and we pull up an account, this is the same account that we were just looking at through GL account maintenance, and it has the exact same features. It's literally the same task accessed from a different point. The reason you might be thinking is, well, why would they have that, under a different menu item, but doing the exact same thing? Good question. The reason is that some people are really budget focused, and that's really their job, and that's, especially in larger organizations, that could be the case. In fact, some organizations have whole job titles called budget analyst. So in that case, that person or persons, those type of staff, might be the kind of people we want to have access to budget maintenance, but maybe we don't want them to have access to the full account maintenance, which has all kinds of other, places where they could do possible damage if they weren't careful. So it's just a way to kind of control the access is all. Okay. And the same things are true here. These buttons do the same things, and any changes you make is effective immediately. All right, we'll talk about the automatic budget copy here next. So this, it's kind of similar to some other screens we've seen already, and they're all very similar in some ways. So we're going to play around with this. This is the automatic budget copy. So we tell it, what budget do we want to copy to. In this case, I'm going to go to the revised just for fun, and then I'm going to say it's based on the original budget. And I'm going to tell it we're going to do I don't know, maybe we're going to do an amount change. Maybe we'll do a percent change. And then, of course, depending on what we pick here, we have to put some relevant data here. So I'm just going to put 10%, and I'm going to make my rounding to dollars. With budgeting, we rarely go down any deeper than that. In fact, in many cases, it's even higher level. And you want to be careful to select your account selections here. And then we're going to put in here, what account range we want to do. So I'm just going to do the 400 series. Just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and just hit proceed. And it's done. Now, if we run the budget report, and we'll run this for the, we'll do this for the revised. And let's see here, we'll just hit, we'll do the 400 series again. And we're just going to take a preview. And sure enough, there's my $500 plus 10%, which is $50 for a total of $550 on my revised budget all the way across. So there we go. Okay, so again, those changes are effective immediately. There's no audit trail for that. So the big benefit there is that you can affect multiple budgets at the same time as opposed to just doing one account at a time. Now we'll talk about the budget revision entry. So the big benefit with the budget revision entry, is that you can actually get an audit trail of what the changes are. So in some organizations, budgets are a real political football. You sometimes get problems with people, manipulating other people's budgets or submitting information for budgets that changes numbers, and then everybody's looking around, well, who changed my numbers? How did this happen? So this is a way of having a little bit of a more controlled process over the budget process. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to just we're going to revise the 2020 original budget, and we're going to make it based on the original budget, and we're going to do I don't know, maybe we'll do a new budget. Actually, we won't base it on that at all. We're just going to make it a new budget, and we're just going to say minus 120,000. We'll put it to dollars. We'll enable these account selections. And actually, we don't want new budget. We're just going to do a percentage change. It makes more sense if we're going to do a whole bunch of accounts. Okay. And then I'm going to update this for the 400 accounts. Whoops. And we'll hit proceed. Now this is going to pop open this screen here. So whatever things that we did on that front screen, it's going to have that loaded here on this big grid screen right here. So in this case, it really only updated that one account. So we could hand key changes into these fields, just like we talked about before. And notice it added the minus sign there for me. It knows that we're doing revenue and that it should be a negative. So these probably should be negative also if we were going to mess with those. But you can hand key those in there. Then you have these same icons down the side, some of which we've already seen. So here is where we can select more accounts. So if we want to select accounts that are not in our selection yet, we can do that. So if we want to add more, we can do that. That just takes us right back to that. If we want to delete this row here, we just highlight the row and we can delete that row out of our selection. If we want to use this change budget cog, we can do that. We can hit in here, we can come up here, let's see here. I want to put myself in the cell that I want to be in. And we'll do the copy amount and we'll just hit proceed, and it copies that amount all the way across. So whatever we do here, when you're done making your changes, we'll see in a minute that we're able to run a register. But let's say that you got in here and this was just really messed up and you just kind of wanted to start over. Common question that we get. How do you clear this out without going row by row by row and hitting delete 10,000 times? So what you can do is you can click that first icon there. That's to select the accounts, and we can just hit the clear button down here. When the clear button's lighted up, it means there's something in there that you have available to get rid of. So if I hit the clear button and I say yes, then it wipes out everything I did. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to just do a new amount. And I'm going to say the new budget is 120,000. And I'm just going to put these on the revenue accounts this time. Okay. And let's see, we'll make it dollars and we'll hit proceed. All right. Little better result that time. It doesn't mean that I would necessarily want to stick with this because maybe they all still need massaged, but now I have more data in here to work with. So that's a way you can kind of clear it if you get stuck. Now we're going to say that we like this budget and we're going to go ahead and we want to finalize this. So nothing had happened. We're just kind of in an entry screen to make the changes we need. When we're ready, we can hit the print button down here and that will start our budget revision register. Or if you went to lunch, let's say, and you came back and you wanted to just run the register, here's the register. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to hit preview here so you can see it. And it's just basically telling us, here's all the changes that we are about to make. So it's got the current budget, the revision amount, and then how much is our new budget. So this one here, the 500 was wrong because it was a debit. We did the revision amount, 120,500 on each column, and then that made our ending amount 120. So this is basically telling us what it's going to do. So I'm going to hit print here. Now, I'm going to say no to updating that register for a minute to show you something else. So if I run the budget revision register again, and I don't preview it this time, if I have paperless office turned on, and I think I have it turned on here, let's find out, it will pop open your paperless office journal and register viewer showing you what it's going to do here. So this is just the same thing as if I were to print it out. The difference is, and I could still print it out by just hitting this print button, but this is a paperless office document, for those of you familiar with that, and this is a way for us to actually record this in kind of the paperless office world to show us what happened. So if we ever wanted to know kind of when this happened, we can see that here's the date that it happened and here's the user who did it. So if I close that and I update that, then I'd be able to run some budget reports, which we'll do in a minute, to see those. I would also, if I was looking at my budget and wondering, well, how did that get changed? And I knew that we had locked the system down to do it this way, then what I could do is I could go into my paperless office, I could look at my journal and register viewer, and I could say, well, here's the last time the budget was adjusted. Here's my register viewer. I can see, exactly when it was done, and I can see who did it. Better yet, I can drill into it and see what was actually done. So here's that same register. Now we have a really good audit trail for what actually happened. Okay. Now we'll talk a little bit about some reports with budget data. So let's see here. Under the general ledger, we have this reports menu, just like you're all used to seeing. And there are some reports in here that have budget data, but we also have reports. The main budget report is actually under the budget menu. So we're just going to run this one first and take a look at it. You do have several options here on the screen to kind of play with for options. The zero ballot budgets, print those or not, that's a key one. If you want totals and you don't want line item detail, you can do that option. And you can pick more than one budget. So if I want my revised budget, if I want all this together, I can certainly do that. I can also pick my years. So you can keep on going. There's no limitation there that I'm really aware of. So what I'm going to do is just hit preview here and kind of see what we get. Notice what you don't get here, though. What you don't get here is anything with an actual. You can only pick budget information. So we'll hit preview here and kind of see what we get. And there it is. So it's telling us, here's our budget report. There's the original. It's got the figures there. There's the revised. There's the figures. If it doesn't list a budget code, it means there is no budget for that code because we're not printing anything that has zeros. Okay, so we're only seeing what does have actual dollars. And if we wanted to see the zeros, we'd check that. We just make this a yes, or an only if we wanted to only see the ones that didn't have a budget. Okay. All right, here's another interesting concept. So let's talk about this for just a moment. We're going to go back to General Ledger Setup for a moment. Let's shrink some of these guys up. So in the General Ledger, there's an option to turn on Rollup Codes. So right here on the main tab, there's these rollup types. And in this example, what I did is I labeled one of those as a manager. Then what I did under the setup under rollup code maintenance in the general ledger is I set up rollup type manager, and I set up managers red, white, and blue. Okay, so these are individual manager names. Then what I did with that is I went over to the account maintenance, and I believe these are in the 400 series, so let's pull those up. Oh, actually, you could see it right there. If you hit the lookup, I'll do that again. You can see that I've added the rollup code to my lookup here. So I can identify based on who the manager is already, what accounts are assigned to what managers for whatever purposes, in this case for budgets. If I pick this first one, how I assign that is the rollup code shows up on the main screen here, and I was able to just pick from my list of managers that I created who the manager is for this particular account. And there's a lot of potential uses for this, but relative to budgets, how that might play out is this. If we go to the budget report, and one of the things that we can see down here is that rollup code. So there's my manager. So if I want to run a budget report only for John Blue, I can pick Blue's manager code here. I can pick his budget, and I can go ahead and look at what Mr. Blue's budget is. So there's the budget report for Blue, and there's all of his. So that's another way of kind of grouping the reporting by manager based on what accounts they're responsible for doing the budget for. You can also run lots of other reports like that. All right. Next one we're going to take a look at is under the regular reports menu. So a couple of reports down here. We have the budget and history report and the budget and history report by period. We're going to take a look at this one first. The thing I like about this one is that you can see your actual postings. So if you're kind of comparing actual to reality, to budget, or you just want to kind of see what the differences are, you can use different budgets or you can use different years' actuals. But unlike that budget report that we saw under the budget menu, this does let us have those actuals. And really, a budget without comparing to actuals is almost useless. I mean, it's almost like a a stray ship. We always want to evaluate something compared to where we're at to see if we're on track or not. So I'm just going to leave this kind of the way it is, and we're not going to do the zeros. We'll just say no. And we're going to just preview to kind of see what we get. And there it is. You can kind of see the layout. It doesn't actually give us a variance, but it does kind of highlight the information for us. A lot of zeros on that one. We'll take a quick look at the budget and history report by period. So very similar setup, except it's more landscape, columns across the top, different layout. So it's, breaking you down, just a little bit different layout, same information, different type of, similar but slightly different reports. We'll talk about these general ledger graphics. This is a report that is underutilized by a lot of people, I think. So we're just going to take a look at the general ledger graphics here. We're going to play with this for a minute. So what I like about this is that it's graphical. So what we're going to do is we'll just leave it as a bar chart. And down here, what we're going to do is make it 2020. And we'll just do the 2020 original budget. And then we're going to do a 2020 actual. And we could add additional information here if we want. You'll get the idea. I'll check the 3D graph just to make it 3D and see what we get. And then I'm going to just run that revenue account range just to, maybe I'll just do, maybe I'll just do a main account. So this is the whole group. There's my main account. So if my main account is 400, then we'll take kind of look at what we get for the main account 400 here. Okay, so there's our chart. Hard to see it, but it's a little blurry. But basically the red bars is our original budget, and the blue bars are our actual postings. So demo data only goes through period 5 of 2020, so that's why we don't see any blue bars past that. And based on this, what we would see is that our budget for revenue was not being met in periods 1 through 4, and then in period 5 we seem to take a jump, and we exceeded the budget in period 5, but probably still have room to go. This is one of the only reports, and maybe the only report outside of Business Insights, that actually offers you a graph. So always like to show that one. Okay. Other things that you can see budget data in is financial reports. So we'll run a quick financial report here. We have a report in here called budget variance. I'm just going to blast through the settings here so you can kind of see what I did. So I made a new report. I called it budget variance. I said it was an income statement type because typically budgeting is done against income statement accounts. I gave it a little title here. I gave it a group, told it it was combined. And then here's the most important part here, column data format. This is where you choose whether or not you're going to include your budget data or not. So as I click that drop down there, you can see there's quite a few choices, and a lot of them have budget in the list. So I went with this one here, actual budget and variance. I'm going to do both these period and year to dates. Nothing too flashy there. Here's the other part where I told it what budget I want to include here, and you only get to pick one, but you can make additional reports if you want to have a different version with a different budget. So I hit next, and then basically that's the part. So now we're going to actually run it to kind of see what this might look like. So we'll check that one. That's the right period. We'll take a preview on this. And I'll zoom this up just a little bit so you can kind of get the feel for it. So here, basically it's your basic out of the can, actual versus budget variance report. So with our year to date and our period to date. So you can, do that right in your financials, right out of the can. All right, we're going to look at a couple other things for looking and kind of analyzing your budget information here. So under the general ledger, every module has this little Explorer folder. So it's one of the great new things that Sage has added in a long time. So since I'm in the GL, I'm only going to see these Explorer views relative to the GL. I'll just briefly mention there's a whole bunch more of these under the Business Insights Explorer. This has the views for the entire system. But under General Ledger, we only have these three. This one here, the third one, the Account Budgets view, is specifically for looking at budget data. So we have a whole lunch and learn separately on how to use this tool. I'm just going to more or less do a few things to show you how this works. So right now, it's the budget view. If we want, we can play around with this. We can see kind of what the activity is here. And let's see here. You can group this, and basically it's just a way of looking at the budget information in a slightly different format. But it is in there, and you can group and do all that kind of stuff. Right now I have this set in the filter to my original budget code, so I know that's what I'm looking at. If I want to filter out, accounts that don't have zeros, I can play with all of these tools here to do that. And this is a pretty standard stock view here. I haven't done anything to customize this. Almost certainly you'd want to play around with it a little bit more. But you'll see you'll have access to the account maintenance from here if you want to go straight and work on it that way. If you want to go to the budget maintenance, or if you want to do your budget revision entries, they've given you some shortcuts to be able to do that from here. And this will just show your information. Let's see here. So here's some accounts that actually have some budget data in them. You can play around with that all you want, but just want to make sure you know it's there. So other than hand keying budget data and using those budget tools that we talked about, there's some other ways that you can get budget data into the system. So let's talk about that. Actually, I got one more report to show you, last but not least, before we talk about importing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into Sage Intelligence. So for those of you who are not familiar with Sage Intelligence, this is a really fantastic reporting tool. It's an Excel-based reporting tool for Sage 100. And, for those accounting types, we get it warm and fuzzy when we're in Excel. So, that's part of why this is such a popular tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a pre-built report that I already have and just show you, an example of how you might be able to pull some budget data into a Sage Intelligence report. And maybe talk about some of the flexibility that you have here that you don't have with, say, that canned financial report that we took a look at a few minutes ago. So we're just going to run this report out and give it a second to populate our information. And I think if I was going to do budgeting, this is a tool that I would definitely be using as an end user. We also have a separate lunch and learn on Sage Intelligence. So if you want to get a little bit more background information on Sage Intelligence, feel free to either go to our YouTube channel or you can sign up for a webinar, an upcoming webinar. Okay, and up comes our report. So I have reports on every tab here. Here's just one kind of looking at budget data and how we might use Sage Intelligence. Let me zoom this up just a hair for those of you out there on the internet world. So really what we have here is this is just an actual versus budget. You can see that these green highlighted accounts are the same 400 series that we've been playing with. You can also see it brought in our fresh budget numbers that we just used. So in this case, what I did was literally at the account level, I recorded what was my actual and what was my budget for that period and what was the variance. Up here, I have a cell that tells, what budget code it is that it's using. And, the way this basically works is we have a formula here that tells it, what GL code, what year, and what period is reporting on. So that's where it gets its information. Kind of one of the cool things that we can see here is that, if we look at this 400 series, these green numbers here, we can see that those add up to the 1.3 million. Now down below here, I have kind of more of a main or a summary level saying, here's the total, total breakdown for that 400 main account. And it of course matches the total there. One of the things I can do if I want to see the details of that is I can drill down. So whereas I pulled the individual numbers there, I could have also pulled them in this way with just a drill down. So kind of making it a little bit more dynamic. I can see the same detailed accounts that roll up to that same 1.3 million there. I'm just going to go ahead and close that. That's enough for there. Now we're going to talk about other ways of getting your budget data into Sage other than hand keying it using, the budget revision register and some of those calculation tools, which are great. But a lot of times people like to work their budget in Excel, and then, hey, when they're happy with it, they want to upload it, or they want to do multiple uploads over time. So we'll talk about how we can do that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go to my general ledger, and we're going to talk about the Visual Integrator module, and I'm going to import an entry into budget revision entry. So the first thing I want to do before I do an import, and this is just good importing policy for those of you not familiar with Visual Integrator, I want to make sure that the data entry that I'm pushing this into is not currently open and has data in it that I'm going to be overwriting. So quick check to make sure the clear button is not lighted up. That tells me that my budget revision entry is clear and we're ready to go. Now what I'm going to do is go to my VI job. So let's see here. Let's see if I can find the template here for you, and we'll talk about how VI might handle this. Okay, so we're going to just talk about, if you were working in Excel, what your Excel file might need to look like. So right here I have this GL budget revision entry template. And all I did here is, it's pretty straightforward, pretty obvious. I've got my budget revision here. I've got my account numbers down the side. I've got my periods across the columns. And I've got my numbers that, I want to bring in here. And actually, I probably want to make those numbers negative because they're revenue, but in this example, they're positive. You get the idea. The concept is the same. And then over here, we already know that budgets are specific not only to the budget code, but the year. So we have the original budget, and we might have the 2020, we might have the 2019, etc. So these say runtime assign because it means in my import job, I'm going to tell the import job what I want this to be at the time I run the job. So you could assign this in your Excel file. I could have put original and 2020 in those two columns. But this is my Excel where I did this. What I did with this information is I copied it and pasted it into another file, which is this budget revision entry CSV. So not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but CSV just is a file extension type that Sage uses to import data most often. Not the only type, but it most often is what's used. So now what I'm going to do is go to my Visual Integrator, and I'm going to pull up the import job that I wrote for using that data. And let's see here. It says it's job budget revision, and here it is. Okay, little delay there. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about how to build a VI job, but we'll just touch upon some of the keys here. So when I created the job, the first thing I had to tell it is, well, what table am I importing you to? So in this case, if we're doing it through VI, we're going to import through the budget revision entry, and then we're going to run the update just like we did when we hand keyed it or we used those calculation tools. So that's the table we're going to push it to. This is just completely optional. This is just a note more or less for the person operating the VI job to tell it, anything you might want. I personally like to note the version number and what I'm actually doing with the job. Here's the file type that says delimited. That's tied into that CSV file. That's what CSV means, comma delimited. So here it's saying it's delimited and the delimiter is a comma. What this is here is this is just pointing my VI job at that comma delimited file that we talked about that I pasted my data into. So all I did is I opened up a blank Excel sheet, I copied and pasted it and did file save as, and told it to save it as a CSV file. Over here on the data tab, this is where the heavy lifting gets done. This is where I've defined where it looks in that file for the information. So we talked about the fiscal year and the budget code being something that the job would ask for at the time we ran it. That's why this fiscal year here is set to runtime assign. It means it's literally going to ask me at the time I run the job what I want. Here's my account key. It's looking in, whoops. It's looking in, saying account key, what account, what GL code, replace, meaning bring it in from the source file, whatever's in column 1. And then here's my budget code. It's going to ask me, and then you can see here's the budgets 1 through 12 that point at the other columns in my spreadsheet. So all I really have to do, you don't have to mess around with these other 2 tabs too much. What I'm going to do now is I'm ready to run my import. So I'm going to click accept, and I'm going to be prepared to run my import. So I'm going to point this at my file that has my information. I'm going to tell it the fiscal year, and I'm going to give it the budget code. Now notice it says budget code in caps. It's very important to remember that if you're using the import process, because it has to be capital. Those codes are what's called a key field. So if they are in capitals, they have to be in capitals. So, whoops, there I go typing it in lowercase. So I'm going to go ahead and type original as my code, and then I can test this if I want, but I'm just going to go for it. And it's going to ask me, hey, you want to import these records into your company here? I'm going to say yes, and it just imported it, and it will tell me how many records it read, how many it read, which is, imported. That's what we want. We want those 2 to be the same. It'll tell me if it skipped any, or if any had any problems. It'll tell me how many it failed, and it gives me the option to look at a log. If you have any skipped or failed records on any kind of an import, including this one, you want to look at your log. So if you come into the log here and it's all black like this, this is what you want to see. That's when it looks good. If it failed something, it'll either be in red if it flat out failed it, or possibly blue if it skipped something. So a classic example is if you had a GL code on your spreadsheet that wasn't actually set up in your general ledger. It would get to that line, it would see that GL code doesn't exist, and it would fail that line and tell you that it was in red and it failed. But if you want to look and see what the data is doing here, is kind of a second check, you can do that. You can see what the log is telling us it did on this particular account. You can also print that out. All right, so now it imported it. It said it imported it. So where did it import it to? It said it imported it, was supposed to go to General Ledger Budget Revision Entry. So let's go to the General Ledger Budget Revision Entry. And there is all of our numbers that we just imported. So when I'm ready to update this, I notice that they came in with the proper credit symbol. When I'm ready to update this, all I have to do is run that revision register just like we did before. So I'm going to hit print, and we're going to let the paperless office produce our register for an audit trail. So there's an audit trail of what I just imported into this entry. Close that. I'm going to go ahead and say yes to update it. Now I can come back to my paperless office if I wanted to, and I could see that second journal that I just did. So now I have an audit trail of how that budget is changing over time, and who did it, when those changes were made, and what the value was before it got changed. We've already seen that, so I'm not going to populate that again. What I do want to do, however, is go back and just run our budget report real quick for that original budget and just see, what we get. And I'll run it through, I don't know, maybe I'll run it through some more accounts. I can't remember how many were in there. But we'll see that we have those updated numbers now for our budget. So that's a way to use VI to do it, and that wasn't too difficult. Now we're going to just talk about a way to import budgets without having the Visual Integrator module at all. So VI is a very powerful module. A lot of people have it, but not everyone has the Visual Integrator, and it does require a higher level of expertise. You have to know a little bit about the data and a few things there to get you over the hurdles. But everybody has something called GL Exchange. All right, so we're going to go and talk about GL Exchange. So under the General Ledger Utilities, there's this thing called General Ledger Exchange. And what I've done here is, and we'll take a look at the settings, is I've set up General Ledger Exchange to be able to import budgets. So I gave it a name, Budget Import. What description do you want to give it? I'm telling it I'm trying to import the original budget. Here's where we tell it what budget right there. So again, it ties right into your settings. Tell it what year do I want. What do I do if there's an expired account? Do I want to exclude them? And in my case, I'm saying never. And then what range of accounts do you want to import data to? In this case, it's a 500 series, a little bit different range than we've been playing with. But I define that. And then I told it what file type. Again, there's a CSV, the most common. And then I'm pointing it at the path where that file is. And then you'll have to use a file format setting here. So really this just has to do with whether or not your General Ledger account number is 9 or is 10 or more characters. In this one it's not, so I'm doing the alternate format based on these instructions down below. So that's how I made my setting. I just went in and clicked new setting and set this up and tested it till I got it to work. Now when I'm ready to run it, I'm just going to hit proceed, and we're going to go ahead and test it. And it says 11 out of 11. Do I want to print the log? If I want to kind of see what it's doing, I can look at this log. And it's telling me no, it doesn't really tell me a whole lot, right? So it didn't skip any. So that's about all it does. And if I want to continue with that import, I say yes. And I'm not going to look at the log again. You've already seen that. And then what will happen is, as we come over here, we'll rerun that report. We'll run the budget report again. And we'll do it for that 500 series this time. And we should see those numbers. I think it was 525. Whoops, I must have hit something. There we go. All right, and we've got the original in here, so we'll just take a look at, see what we got if we have any numbers in our 500 series now. And we do. Now, the other thing to kind of point out here is with that GL Exchange approach, there's no audit trail for that either. It just pushes it in, and there's the numbers. So it's a lot like some of those earlier features where things take effect immediately without that budget revision register. But it does provide a way for almost pretty much anyone who has Sage to import their budget information. So that's the good part. Okay, that is the end of the budget features that I had planned to show you. I'm going to open it up for questions.
Okay, Bruce, I'm going to open up the lines, but in the meantime, we do have a question from Wendy. There are two questions. Can you calculate based on a previous year's actual and assign a percentage?
It's like the boss don't want me to buy it.
I just muted that line for the background noise, but did I mute Bruce? I did. Sorry, Bruce, I muted you.
Okay, so we're going to say we can try the copy amount. So actually, let's go to the budget revision register. I think that's going to be a better, has a little bit more capabilities. And I think the answer, I'm not sure, but let's see here. So budget to revise original, revise based on, in this example, this would probably be the activity. And then the revision method could be a percentage change. All right, so let's say we did a 10%, I don't know, change based off of the activity. Then I'm going to put in my account here. I'm just going to zero in on this one account so we can kind of see what it's doing. So there's my one account, and I'm going to hit proceed. and that account may not have had any actuals. So hold on, let's it looks like it's doable, but let's find an account that actually has actuals. Let's see, what's the quickest way to do that? Let's just go to account maintenance and we'll find one. Actually, we'll just run a financial report real quick and find one. We'll run our budget report. How about that? And we'll just pick one that we know has some actuals. Okay, so we have period to date. Let's see here. 401, number 400, 100. All right, and let's see what we can do with that one. Okay, revise the original based on the activity. We'll say 10%. Okay, so we'll see if this works. We're going to hit proceed here, and it did not do it. Did not do it based on a percentage. So that may not work. At least I'm not getting it to work here. So what we might have to do, go back here, let's play around with it. You could either do it in Excel, or you might have to do a multiple pass. So if we said original budget based on the activity, and we said copy the amount from period 1 to 12, and we gave it, actually maybe we should have looked at the column 5. We may not have looked far enough, but let's try that one more time. Okay. Now let's see if it's in column 5 or not. Yep. There is period 5. It did work. It did work. So that does work. It just happens to be the demo data is very spotty, and it looked like it didn't work because there's so many zeros in the early periods. But that account, that 401,000, had 401,325 in it, and it looks like that's roughly a 10% increase there. So it appears that that does work.
So Bruce, Wendy is asking, what was the year that you ran the financials for?
2020.
2020, because it's demo data. So so in the Sage demo data, it has future years. That's why, Wendy. She also has another question. Oh, she's saying, what about the year 2019? Wendy, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask.
Sorry, that was just based on the information. I was wondering if the report had 2019. But my other question was, so we have event budgets. Is there any way to incorporate that within Sage? I know that we have the original budget, but I wonder if we have an events budget.
So I'm having a really hard time.
Yeah, let me read the question because she's echoing a bit. She's saying, if we have budgets for event expenses, what is the way to best manage that in Sage?
Interesting. Well, so
couldn't you just set up, like instead of original budget, revised budget, couldn't you set up a separate events budget?
You could. There's a couple thoughts that come to mind. You could certainly have a budget code related to an event. So whereas mine was like, original or 2020 plan, you could have an event as your code. I'm not sure if that's where she's getting at, having a separate budget based on an event. At the end of the day, though, they're all tied to GL accounts. So you could, and we'll see if this answers the question or not, but you could, let's say, for example, and I don't know what what events we're thinking of, but I'm just going to call it like, well, I'm thinking of remodel, office remodel. So if we were trying to set up a budget for the office remodel, then we could create a code like that, and then we could certainly do budgeting based on that. But it's still, at the end of the day, tied to individual GL accounts. So if in this case, let's say office remodel, that probably is going to be more like a lot of expenses. So if we said, I'll just pretend building maintenance is one of the GL codes that was going to be getting expenses for this project, office remodel, I could come in here and do my budget for the office remodel. I'll take out this revised, let's say, and I'll add the office remodel budget here. And I could come up with a budget for that way. Some people actually, so you can create a code, and that allows you to track budgets based on a GL account. And I have seen people do this. I have seen people use those rollup codes for projects. So this could have been, project, and the project could have been office remodel, and we could have slapped the office remodel project on applicable accounts. And that'd be a way for us to actually run those budget reports based on the project itself.
So Bruce is asking, how would you tag an AP to show it was part of that event's budget?
Say that again. How would I tag it to what?
Tag it in AP to show that it was part of that event's budget. It would be based on the account, correct?
Yeah. So let's hypothetically just pretend for a moment that, or I'll put one in here. Well, let's try to make it realistic. Let's see how fast I can go on the fly here. All right. So one way of doing it might be to do this. And then I'll go into account maintenance, and I'll pull up, I think it was a 5 account, building maintenance. I didn't remember what code it was. All right, 51503. So let me write that down. Okay. Then actually we're going to have to come up with a project here real quick. So hold on. Okay, then I would assign, I'll pretend the 515 is going to be one of my accounts here. Then I could assign that project, just like so. Now, when I'm in accounts payable, so I'd have a budget, under that 515 account, put in our 2020 date because it's demo data. Then I will be in accounts payable. I'd go to invoice data entry. We'll just do something, pick anybody here because it's demo data. They gave me an invoice number for something. And let's say it was $1,000. And then I go over here, my lines tab, and now I'm coding my actual expenses that I might want to track against my budget. So if this one was pre-coded, so we need to change that, and that's the wrong account anyway. So now I'm coding my invoice, right? So then I'm going to do, let's see what I have here. I'm going to make a custom lookup, and I'm just going to call this my project view. I can choose to make it my default view if I want. And then I got account number description. And then I'm going to do Rollup Code 2, because that's the one I recorded my project for. And I'm going to rename this project, because that's what we call it. I'm going to hit next, and then I'm just going to hit finish. Then when I'm looking up in AP and I'm doing my looking, I could very easily look up the project. There it is. And then it would bring in the appropriate GL code, and that's it. Away I go. Then I can post that. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick, and that will record the actual expense, but it's tying it into my project ID rollup code. And we'll push that over to the GL. And we'll just skip this for now to save time. Then, if I did my report, I'll just go into account maintenance now, or make it quicker. And we'll do account inquiry, same difference, we just won't change anything. 515-00-03. Then what we'd come over here is to we could look at the variance tab, for example. We could say, there's our original budget, and then here's our activity, just like that. So that's where we could be comparing it. So, you know, the transactions will all add up to that, but that's a way of doing it, I think, based on what you're describing.
I guess the question becomes is whether you're going to have one GL with multiple projects. In that case, what you need to do is you need to set up a user-defined field that can also be exported over to the Sage Intelligence.
Fair enough. And if you're doing projects, yeah, it all depends on how you're doing your project accounting. Some people have a separate set of GL codes for particular projects, so they can run financials for that particular project. But yes, you can do UDFs in Sage Intelligence also. And really, that's all those category codes are. They're just kind of pre-built places where you can use a user-defined field, as opposed to going through the whole custom office module to do it.
Mm-hmm. I did that for one customer that had multiple jobs, and it was all, and they wanted to get basically a costing for a particular job, which would have material, labor, and everything else. And basically, when they got over to the Sage Intelligence, they would show them when they drilled into a particular expense account, they could see what individual projects that went against. And then they created crystal reports that then printed out and filtered out of the GL detail, because the UDF was in the GL detail for the project number, and they could generate a report and come up, here's our material, here's the labor, and et cetera, on a particular job number.
Sure. Key difference between what you're describing and what I just showed is category codes are built in, but there's one label, you know, essentially. There's no ability to do multiple projects in the manner you're describing. Yeah. So they would have had to do the UDF at a deeper level, which allowed them to pull it out of the detail records themselves. My example was more of, there's one account for this project, or this account is only for this one project. Correct. But yes, fair comments.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I don't see anything else from Wendy. I don't see any other questions or chats. So are there any other questions regarding the budgeting? I am going to take that as a no. I thank everyone for their time today. Bruce, I especially thank you for your valuable time in showing us and presenting budgets to us. It is very much appreciated. We do have What's New in 2018 coming up at the end of the month after the Thanksgiving holiday, so Sage 100C and Sage 100 2018. Please join us for that. And everyone have a very wonderful day, and thank you.
Has this been recorded so I can play
Yes,
it back?
it has been recorded. It has been recorded, and it will be posted up to the ISM YouTube channel.
Okay. Can you send out a link on that?
I can. I'll send you an email, John, and the ISM YouTube is below our signature on our link. So there's a little link there. It should go up by tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, because I got another customer who wants to take a look at that, the inventory advisor that you had on Tuesday, which would be right up this customer's alley, what they need. So I'd like
Perfect. That also will be going up. I don't think our guru who does that has posted that up yet, but I'll ask him to ensure that everything gets posted up by end of day tomorrow.
Super.
Okay, everyone, have a wonderful day, and thank you for your time. Bruce, thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. Everybody have a nice rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.